I think we'll go ahead and come to order. Anne, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, thank you very much. All right, if you would please announce your name when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Dave Pine.
County of San Mateo. Ooh, I see Carol. Yep, she's talking, but it's okay. I got you, Carol. Oh, there you are. Okay, Town of Atherton.
Rick DeGolia.
City of Belmont.
Julia Mates.
City of Brisbane.
Colleen Mackin.
City of Burlingame.
Donna Colson.
Town of Colma. Colma. City of Daly City.
Rodas Megwa.
City of East Palo Alto.
Carlos Romero.
City of Foster City. Foster City. City of Half Moon Bay.
Harvey Rohrback.
Town of Hillsborough.
Larry May.
City of Los Banos.
Alex Terrazas.
City of Menlo Park.
Betsy Nash.
City of Millbrae. Millbrae? Oh, she's muted. There, thank you. City of Pacifica.
Tiger Jazz twirls big stick.
Town of Portola Valley.
Jeff Alfs.
City of Redwood City.
Michael Smith.
City of San Bruno.
Marty Medina.
City of San Carlos.
Laura Palmer Lohan.
City of San Mateo.
Rick Bonilla.
City of South San Francisco.
Flor Nicholas.
Town of Woodside.
Here.
Oh, is that Jennifer?
Yep, hello.
Oh, thank you very much. Director Emeritus.
Jaideep Gupta.
And Director Emeritus.
John Keener.
Thank you, and we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. And I believe we have one person to be sworn in.
Which I'm happy to do as soon as someone sends me the admonition.
Oh, okay, I will do that.
David, we thought you always had the copy with you at all times.
Oh,
Well,
I thought he had it memorized.
I am always ready to defend the Constitution at all times, but no, I do not have the oath memorized. I probably should.
oh, well, we do have it shared on the screen for you.
Okay, I can make that. I can make that work.
Thank you.
And who is the person who I'm swearing in?
It would be Alex from Los Banos.
Awesome. So Alex, if you would do me the favor of standing or pretending to stand and raising your right hand. And then after I say I, if you'd state your name, and then I'll and then just repeat after me. So I do and state your name, please.
I, Alex Terrazas,
Do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
on which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
This is Larry May. Does Christine Krolik get sworn in tonight too as well? Leave that up to Jan.
No.
Oh, is Christine on? Oh,
I
She
thought-
is.
okay,
I
then
am.
yes, that is another new member.
Okay.
No one gets enough of the oath. Is there anybody else before we? Is there anyone else?
Swear us all in, David.
Yeah, we'll swear everybody in. Christina, is it Christine? Is that all right?
It is. It is.
Christine, if you would please raise your right hand, and after I say "I," if you would state your name. I
I, Christine Krolik,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for that catch. And thank you, David. And Christine and Alex, welcome. Our next item will be public comment. If anyone wishes to address the board on an item not on tonight's agenda, you may do so now. And please raise your hand in the software so that I can see if you want to speak. Okay, I do not see any hands raised.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I was trying to find the raise my hand function.
Okay.
It's just that there was a public comment in the agenda packet
Oh,
with a cover from Bill Knack from the IBEW with a letter from Dave Morrow from the IBEW. And
Right.
then there was an additional public comment that came in last night that I sent out today that is posted on the website. And that was a cover from Bill Knack. And the letter was from the Sierra Club, Luis Amerzua.
okay. Then they are on the website and they're in the record, and we will note them as such. Is there any other public comment this time? Okay, I don't see any. So at this point, I can take an action to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda.
Jeff, before you take that motion, I think that there is the intent to remove item 10 from the agenda. So if that is still the case, and I believe that it is, I think the motion would be to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda, pulling item 10.
Thank you for the reminder. That is correct. Yeah, policy 16 is going to be pulled tonight, just to do a little bit of redrafting on it. We can quickly answer questions about that when we get to item 5, which is a selection of vice chair. But yes, I will take a motion on that on the amended agenda and consent agenda.
Okay, so moved as amended.
Okay. And a second?
Second, Larry May.
Okay. Moved by Rick Bonilla, seconded by Larry May. And roll call vote, please.
Okay, if you would please announce your approval or disapproval of the motion when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Yes.
County of San Mateo.
Yes.
Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Yes.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto,
Yes.
City of Foster City, City of Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough,
Yes.
City of Los Banos,
Yes.
City of Menlo Park,
Yes.
City of Millbrae. Millbrae? Yep. Thank you. City of Pacifica,
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley,
Yes.
City of Redwood City,
Yes.
City of San Bruno,
Yes.
City of San Carlos,
Yes.
City of San Mateo,
Yes.
City of South San Francisco,
Yes.
Town of Woodside.
Yes.
And the motion passes.
Great, thank you. Okay, that brings us to our regular agenda, item 1, which is the chair report. Which I will just say one thing, which is this is my last chair report. 2 regular years and 1 really, really long year ago, I succeeded Dave Pine as the chair of this board. And tonight on item 5, we will be selecting a new chair and vice chair. I just wanted to take a minute and thank all of you for everything you've done to help PCE and to make this a success. It's been really, I think, a pretty overwhelming, resounding success. I just want to thank all of you as board members. I want to thank staff. I want to thank the public. I think we've done some tremendous work. I have enjoyed being being the guy running these meetings, but I will also enjoy being somebody watching them. So thank you all, and I think I'm ready to move on from here. So
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay, Pradeep has his hand up. Did you want to say something, Pradeep?
Yeah, I have, Jeff, I just wanted to say that I have been on PCE board as long as you have been from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your leadership in the critical years really provided a great start. So thank you very much for all the services you have done for the community and for PCE.
Thank you. Thank you. Marty.
Yes, Jeff, I just wanted to echo that. I mean, we've come a long way, and you've done a great job. So I just wanted to let you know that it's much appreciated.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I had a lot of help, obviously. Donna, go ahead.
Thanks. I also want to thank Jeff because there was a lot of work to do on the financial side of this organization, and you were incredibly supportive and very stalwart in your leadership about getting this organization its investment grade credit rating and all the other important work that had to happen in order to really present the cleanest and most robust financial situation that we could. So I just appreciate the partnership that you've given me over the past 2 years.
That feeling is mutual, and thank you for everything you've done to the financial end as well. Ann Schneider.
I want to say thank you, Jeff. You've always been great for those of us who come in as alternates, and sometimes we need a little bit more coaching, especially on process. But I got to tell you, Jeff has now joined SFO Noise Roundtable, and I know so many of you love that committee. I welcome you with open arms to SFO Noise.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm just learning about it now, so thank you. Okay, Laura, go ahead.
Jeff, I just want to thank you on your chairship for the PCE. You've done a phenomenal job. Your command of the issues has been able to be deployed to bring us towards decisions swiftly and with clarity. And that is a real testament to your knowledge of the industry and your skill at the chair. So thank you so much for everything that you've done for the board and the team and the community. You will be missed in this role, and look forward to working with you in a new capacity.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere, but yes, I will just not be running the meetings. Dave, go ahead.
Jeff, I too wanted to share my appreciation for your service, your deep understanding of our company and of the markets of the energy world is so impressive. I mean, I don't think there's many board members, if any, across the entire CCA movement that really have the depth of knowledge that you have, and it's really served us so well. I mean, thinking back to where PCE was 3 years ago and where it was now, and just a tremendous period of progress, and we've been fortunate to have you as chair. So very, very grateful for your service.
Thank you. It's been fun. I actually really enjoy sort of figuring some of this stuff out. So it's been a lot of fun. Thank you. Rick Bonilla.
Thank you, Jeff. I just want to say that, you know, in all the time that I've worked with PCE, that you've always been a gentleman, pleasant, easy to work with, generous in thought and with your time. And I just really appreciate what you have brought to the table. You brought a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. If there are no other comments, that's the end of my report. So we'll move on to the CEO report. Jan, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I will add also my thanks to Jeff for being an awesome chair for the last few years. It's been great working with you and getting to know you. And not only does Jeff run the meetings where you all see him, but he has also attended a lot of other energy events, a lot of other energy conferences to make sure that he knows and is up on the latest. He always comes to the meetings we have with the legislator, we have with the PUC commissioners, and Jeff, I hope you will continue to represent the board for these really important meetings. And so I look forward to continuing to work closely with you together in your new role.
Thank you. Me too.
Okay. And I wanted to note the packet tonight includes the information on the load changes due to COVID and the reach code updates. So rather than going through those and taking time here, that is in the written report that you all received. And I do want to congratulate San Carlos for adopting both a building and an EV reach code earlier this week. So that brings us to 10 jurisdictions. So big round of applause for Laura and bringing San Carlos to where it is.
Well done.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So I will report on a few things on the CC Power Board meeting, the Cal CCA bill, open positions that we have, in a list of the next meetings. So the next slide, please. So in tonight's packet, the notes from the first board meeting, which was held on February 17th, are there. And Rick Bonilla attended. Thank you, Rick, as well as some other folks who are interested in watching what's going on there. And one of the key items that was of interest to all of you, I'm sure, is the discussion about policies for the new organizations. So an ad hoc policy development committee was formed, and we had our first meeting this afternoon, actually. And I am on that along with the CEOs of Sonoma, Redwood Coast, and East Bay. And we hope to be bringing a draft policy statement to the CC Power Board either in March or April. Next slide, please. I believe we included this in the newsletter, but I wanted to make sure you were aware. There is a bill that is sponsored by Cal CCA. It's SB 612, introduced by Senator Portantino, who actually happens to be the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He's from Southern California, and he agreed to be the sponsor of this bill. And what it does is it adopts, it's a PCIA related bill. Basically, there was a recommendation made to the Public Utilities Commission by Cal CCA, Southern California Edison and Commercial Energy a year ago. The PUC has done nothing. And because of that, we are introducing a bill to try to get this moving. And basically what this would do would be to provide all customers their right to their proportionate shares of IOU legacy resource products that we're paying for the PCIA and not necessarily getting. It would also require the PUC to establish a price for GHG-free energy, which right now it does not. It would also require the IOUs to sell any excess legacy products to the wholesale market that aren't otherwise purchased by themselves, CCAs or DA customers. And then for the legacy contracts, it requires the IOUs to ask the counterparties to renegotiate or buy out the contracts from folks like us who might be interested in owning those resources. So that would help to bring the PCIA down because it would remove part of the costs that are thrown in that. So hopefully this will either get passed in the legislature or the PUC will feel a little pressure here and actually do their job. Sorry to sound a little harsh on that, but you know how we all feel about the PCIA. And 4 of our local delegation are co-authors for this bill, Senators Josh Becker and Scott Wiener, and Assembly members Mark Berman and Kevin Mullen. So we're very glad that our jurisdiction is supporting this bill. Next slide, please. We have 3 open positions at PCE. One is for a community outreach manager to help us with our outreach, start our enrollment there, and further outreach in the overall Central Valley area. We also have an opening for a legislative analyst, and we have an opening for an energy contracts manager, which will be posted tomorrow. So if you please reach out to your networks and ask people to take a look at those and apply if they're interested. And then lastly, the next slide, our meetings for next month. We'll meet with the Executive Committee on March 8th, the CAC on the 11th, and our next board meeting will be 28 days from now on March 25th. Happy to answer any questions or continue to move on.
Any questions? So I think you can move on.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had more to report. Okay. Item 3 is our Citizens Advisory Committee report. Desiree, are you going?
Yes, okay. I'm here. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Thank you.
I just wanted to take a second actually before giving my report to also thanks, Jeff. I know hearing from many of the CAC members that the past couple of years that he's been involved as chair, we really feel like there's a stronger connection between the board and our committee. And so I want to thank him for his leadership in that. And then for my report, we met 2 weeks ago. Really a couple items that are on your agenda tonight, items 7 and 9. We got a preview to and we're able to review that information on the strategic budget priorities as well as the legislative platform. And thanks to Jan for coming to the meeting, providing that preview for us. And we also got an update on building electrification programs from Shraddha. And the committee in general is very interested in this topic. And luckily, one of our committee members, Diane Bailey, has arranged for a building electrification panel of speakers at our next meeting. So I'd like to invite everyone on the board to come to our next meeting if you're available. We'll have speakers from, let's see, from Sonoma Clean Power, SMUD, Be Smart Carbon Free Palo Alto, and Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And it'll be toward the top of our agenda. So it'll start somewhere just after 6:30.
What's the date?
2 weeks from today. So I guess that would be the 11th of March. Yeah, and that's all I wanted to report actually.
Okay. I apologize. I had to miss this meeting this month. I believe Rick and Donna were there. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I was there. Yeah, it was a good meeting. People were very participatory as they normally are. I thought it was a really good meeting. I don't have anything special to report.
Okay.
I think the one thing that I would say is that we talked about the sort of critical path of getting the work done at their committee, and by taking it to sort of the board for approval and then kind of working it down, that would hopefully focus and streamline the work that they're doing back to feedback right into the board and staff sort of direction. And I think Desiree was very open to that, and they were very appreciative of that kind of conversation. So just look forward to continue working with them and getting all that support that they provide with such amazing technical expertise and community outreach.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Okay.
Oh, I guess just in response to Donna's point there, yeah, over the next couple of months, we'll be getting more information on particular topics that are of interest to staff, and we can circle back to the board and also within our committee to see what our interests are and kind of finalize what topics we'll focus on for the next few months.
Okay, great. If there are no other questions or comments, then I will thank Desiree, and I think we can move on to the Audit and Finance Committee report. Donna.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We had a meeting on February 8th. Much of what we discussed is going to be discussed again here tonight on items 7 and 8, so I really won't go over it again. Other than to say that I really appreciated the incredibly robust discussion and how everybody really weighed all the advantages and disadvantages to the different options that we have on how to especially put our reserve policy together. So there were a lot of different viewpoints, but I think everyone coalesced pretty much around what's you're gonna hear tonight. So thanks for that hard work.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board for Donna or the Audit and Finance Committee? Okay, and as Donna mentioned, we'll be discussing a lot of what we talked about 2 weeks ago. We'll be talking about again tonight. So thank you, Donna, for introducing that. That brings us to item 5, which is selection of the chair and vice chair. We in December and then again in January, we appointed and then confirmed a nominating committee for the chair and vice chair positions. Dave Pine graciously served as the head of that committee. I will turn it over to him to make nominations here.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So the nominating committee did meet to consider the candidates for chair and vice chair. The sole candidate for chair was Rick DeGoya, and there were 2 candidates for vice chair, Donna Colson and Laura Palmer-Lohan. So with respect to chair, our decision was easy, partly because there's only 1 candidate, but more importantly, because Rick DeGoya is such a superbly qualified person to serve as the chair. Rick, as we know, has been instrumental in the success of PCE since its inception. And as everyone observes, he brings an incredibly sharp mind and great judgment to all the issues we face. So we feel that we're fortunate that Rick wants to serve as chair, and there's no question that he'll do so with distinction. With respect to the vice chair, we had 2 great candidates in Laura Palmer-Lohan and Donna Colson. Both have been active board members, and they bring strong skill sets from their professional careers as well. The nominating committee does recommend Donna Colson to serve as vice chair. That decision was based on her long service on the board and depth of her participation as a board member. Donna has served on the PCE board since its founding. She's served as very ably, as the chair of the PCE Audit Committee, where she's helped shepherd forward strong financial policies. She's also served on the Executive Committee. And finally, she led the Strategic Planning Committee, where she was instrumental in helping the board and staff develop the strategic plan. So given that experience and that track record, the nominating committee does recommend Donna Colson's appointment as vice chair of the PCE board. That's the report, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, Dave. We have a nomination of Rick DeGolia as chair and Donna Colson as vice chair. Does someone want to make a motion to accept that recommendation?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
It's moved by Larry May, seconded by Julia Mates. And roll call vote, please.
Okay, if you would please announce your approval or disapproval of the motion when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Yes.
County of San Mateo.
Yes.
Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Yes.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto.
Yes.
City of Foster City.
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos.
Yes.
City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
City of Millbrae.
Yes.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
City of Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno.
Yes.
City of San Carlos.
Yes, and congratulations to Rick and Donna.
City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside.
Yes.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Great. Thank you, Anne. And I'll just be the first to congratulate both Rick and Donna on their new positions, and to thank you both for stepping up and serving the organization as you long have, and for now serving as chair and vice chair of the board. Rick, go ahead.
So a couple comments. First, thank you very much to the board. I very deeply appreciate your support. You know how important this organization is to me. I mean, those of us that have served on this board from the beginning, it was a baby that we built into a incredible, active, responsive entity, and we all feel extremely proud of it, and know that we have a great task in front of us to continue this momentum and deal with the new issues that are absolutely going to come up. And along that line, I'm thrilled that Cal CCA has taken the initiative to get such a substantial bill introduced by the chair of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. This is an issue that had to be dealt with, and I'm so thrilled that we're moving forward on it. It's just one of the issues that's a critical issue for us as we go forward over the next few years. I have two other comments. One is I want to say that I'm also thrilled that Donna is elected as the vice chair. I felt great that two such strong women were nominated to be vice chair. It's long overdue that we have women from the boards in executive leadership, and I feel great about it. We have a strong woman CEO. We have very strong women on the board who have contributed extremely important series of inputs that have built this organization and defined it as we've made our adjustments. And I think I would have felt great about serving with Laura, and I feel terrific about serving with Donna. So I'm glad that we've gone down that path. It's exactly the right thing to do. And finally, I didn't comment previously about Jeff, but Jeff, I know I'm not going to fill your shoes. That is not possible. Your technical knowledge, Dave addressed it in his comments. but your technical knowledge is really invaluable. And I intend to draw on you like I have continued to draw on Pradeep as we go forward, because each of you have different technical knowledge, but we are so fortunate as an organization to have people with the different skills and perspectives that bring to this board. It's the most strategic board I serve on. So I really appreciate all of the commitment and the hard work that you've done. I mean, what Jan said is right. Jeff attends many conferences. He does have the excuse that it's his day job, but the reality is he uses it to really contribute to who we are and where we're going. And that's extremely important. So, so thank you all. I'm humbled.
Well, thank you, Rick. And having worked alongside you for the past, well, 5 years, but more closely in the last 3 years, I know that you will. I know I'm leaving the board in able hands, both you and Donna, and I look forward to seeing the leadership and how you continue to lead this board, starting with item 6.
Okay, so we have the selection of the Citizens Advisory Committee Recruitment Committee. I'm not sure who's presenting this.
We'll turn to Kristen for this.
Sure. Hello, board members. Every year we open up a recruitment for our Citizens Advisory Committee, and we do that. We're starting now so that we'll have folks lined up for when to fill in any terms that have opened up for the for the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting in May or June. So generally we'll post an application on our website, ask your help in getting that out to your qualified residents, and the committee is open to anybody in our service territory. It used to be that it was anyone in San Mateo County. We've actually just changed that. It's on your consent agenda that we've changed that everyone in the service territory, so that now includes the city of Los Banos. And then the board every year has selected a committee of board members to interview the top candidates and select the candidates to fill any open positions. So tonight we're asking you to select a couple of members from your board for a subcommittee to interview those candidates and guide staff through that process.
Okay. And do you have candidates that have already expressed their interest in being on that recruitment committee, or shall we appoint that now?
Appreciate that if you pointed that now.
Okay, great. Do I have any board members who would be interested in serving on the CAC recruitment committee?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yes, I did it last year and I would really enjoy doing it again this year.
Great. And I see Marty and Donna and Rick Benia's hands up.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to serve.
Thank you, Rick.
Happy to serve.
Donna, Marty, that is a 4-person committee. Is there anybody else who'd be interested?
Okay. This is Jan, if I may. We are hoping to have a representative from Los Banos on the committee. So Alex, I wonder if you could either raise your hand or volunteer Tom to also be on that committee.
Yep, Alex has raised his hand.
Great.
Well, that's great. Alex, we do hope to have somebody from Los Banos on that committee. I think that it's important that you guys are represented at every stage of this organization, and we all take that very seriously. So thank you for participating on that. I think a 5-member committee is a good size. Okay, and we need a motion to approve those 5 members on the recruitment committee. Is that correct? David, do we need a motion on this, or can I just appoint them?
I mean, you technically you can't just appoint them, but there doesn't need to be a vote. There can be a vote. It's academic. if you want to do a vote, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, well, they volunteered. I think we can accept that as the committee and move forward.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. The next item on the agenda is item 7, which is a review of the strategic budget priorities.
And this will be presented by Andy, and I'll jump in more towards the end. So Andy, take it away.
Okay, well, I'm happy to present. Let's see. As long as I see how to move the screen. Okay. All right. So over the past couple of months, staff has evaluated the impact of several forecast models. At the executive committee meeting that was held on January 11th, based upon the then current set of forecasts, we presented what we thought was a revenue forecast, which was $20 million less than budgeted over the next 4.5 years, and higher costs that were $72 million more than budgeted over the next 4.5 years. So a $92 million negative in total, in combination, over the next 4.5 years, so the end of fiscal 25. As a result of that, the executive committee set up a strategic budget priorities subcommittee, which was made up of a subcommittee of the executive committee. And that's strategic budget priority subcommittee met on January 22nd and on February 1st. Sorry, this is not moving. Hey, Shana, why don't you go ahead and control, and I'll tell you when to move it. So as most of you know, the PCIA rate and PG&E generation rates drive what we can charge. During that review period with the Strategic Budget Priorities Subcommittee, those 2 meetings, there were 2 very significant forecasts that were released by outside consultants over a 3-day period. The fluctuation between those 2 forecasts was $150 million swing, where the worst case would have put us in a very dire financial case. The latest forecast is better now than those first 2 that were provided to the executive committee even in January. The takeaway from all of that is that there's not a good forecasting infrastructure to rely on. Our financial picture and long-term forecast is heavily dependent on those forecasts. They bounce around significantly, and even the ones we're using now could likely be off. And we received from some information in the last couple of days that indicates that it's slightly worse, although not dramatically worse. But the conclusions that were reached as a result of those discussions, that we expect continued volatility. We don't have much confidence in the projections. And as a result, staff proposed some budget and process changes to tighten expenses over the next few years and create some additional financial flexibility, although they are largely on the fringe. And if the forecasts are dramatically different, we could be coming back to you with some bigger changes. Both of these changes that I'm going to walk through now, the executive committee and the audit and finance committee reviewed both of them on February 9th and asked us to review them with you at this board meeting. Next slide, please. Both of them committees, as I mentioned, supported the proposed changes. I'm going to summarize 4 of them, but walk through only 2 in detail since I don't want to take up too much time. The first was a set of power purchase agreement implementation plan changes. They were summarized by a delay in a couple of projects, reordering of which projects to do and when over the next few years. But in summary, we believe that they'll save $8.3 million over the next 4.5 years. The second was a set of revised renewable targets. That's a large savings of $28 million that I will walk you through in detail. And the third is a revised policy related to resource adequacy penalties that we expect to save $4.4 million. I'll also walk you through that in more detail. And then the fourth was a set of energy program timing adjustments. So in total, those saved over $15 million, maybe $17 million. Basically, what we've done is taken a hard look at programs that have been approved by the board and delayed in terms of our planning, delayed some expenses based on the expectation of when we think we can roll them out, what we expect the real uptake of rebates and program implementation timing. So none of these actually cut programs, but they reflected a delay in when we expect timing that allows us to forecast a better financial picture. So let me go through those other two before I pause a little bit later. Next slide, please. So the first is we eliminated some interim annual renewable targets. So this is our organizational strategic priority is to deliver 50% renewable and then 100% renewable on January 1, 2025 after that. Instead of having that cliff change where we would just be at 50% over the next few years and then at 100% on January 1, 2025, we had planned to implement a stair-step process where we would achieve 60% in 2021, 70% in 2022, and so on. Some of that would have been achieved by signing up additional power purchase agreements for renewable products. But largely, or a lot of it would have been made up by buying renewable energy credits, which allow PCE to report that we would meet those levels, but don't actually change how much renewables are actually produced or purchased by PCE or in a power purchase agreement. But and as a result, we have decided, instead of spending that money, which doesn't really improve the environment or the world, that we will just allow the achievement of the renewable targets over the next 2 years to grow organically. So as we sign up new PPAs, we will achieve what they allow us to. So as an example, in 2022, instead of achieving 70%, we might be at 68% just by having signed PPAs or whatever, but we wouldn't buy RECs to achieve the 70%. And the estimated savings of eliminating that stair step is $28 million. Next slide, please. The next area that we looked at was penalties for resource adequacy. PCE is obligated by the CPUC and the CAISO to meet certain RA requirements on an annual basis. The CPUC and the CAISO have rules that impose penalties for not meeting those objectives. The CPUC has imposed penalties on CCAs, although the CAISO has the authority to do so, it has rarely imposed them. To date, PCE's standard position has been to pay market prices for RA, even when the cost of paying for those prices was more than what the penalty would have been. And other CCAs have adopted general adoption, although not all, a practice to choose the least costly option. So we have decided, given the need to tighten our expense projections, that we would adopt a policy where we will pay the penalty to the CPUC and by market only pay the price when pay for the price for RA when the price is less than the than the penalty. This savings of 4.4 million assumes that the CAISO charges 50% of its penalty. So if in fact the CAISO doesn't charge penalty, as I said, they have rarely imposed them, the savings would be greater. If they did impose the full penalty, there wouldn't be any savings, but it wouldn't cost us any more than the additional roughly $4.4 million. Next slide, please. As a result of all these changes and the proposed savings, this is a summary financial. So in fiscal year 2021, the left column, which ends in June, we are projecting a change in net position of a positive $3.8 million. That's better than the budgeted minus $8.5 million. However, those savings that we're proposing are not enough to make up the expected differential in loss in fiscal 22 and fiscal 23, where we are currently projecting to lose $13 to $16 million a year before it starts to improve. And then we expect some improvement in that change in net position in fiscal year 25. Now, keep in mind, these forecasts are all based on current PG&E rate and PCIA rate assumptions and energy load assumptions. And as I mentioned before, they've been all over the map and wildly fluctuating. And so I can't tell you that we have a lot of confidence in these numbers, but these are where we are at the moment based upon the most current forecasts. Down at the bottom is an estimated reserves of cash. There's 3 line items that we presented to both committees. The first is how much we have actual cash on hand. The second line is days cash on hand, but reduced by cash that is restricted or held for covenant or by the term of agreement. And the third row is our current policy. The next item that for the board's agenda tonight is looking at the board reserve policy, and we'll be recommending actually the second line, which is the unrestricted days cash on hand. But the third line is the current policy until it's changed. The current policy requires us to meet 180 days. And as you can see, even in this forecast, it never goes below 180 days, which would meet our reserve policy, but it does start to bump up against and close to that level, and would cause us some concern. And we had some earlier discussion that's come up at direction of the Audit and Finance Committee that the board would consider changes when our reserves drop to below 200 days of cash on hand. As I mentioned, we're going to have a discussion at the next agenda item about adopting the second policy. So I'm going to pause there and ask if this, by the way, is just an agenda item just to give you an update on the review that the Strategic Budget Priorities Committee asked us to look at, and the review that we went through in more depth with the Executive Committee and the Audit and Finance Committee. I will pause there.
Are there any questions of clarification from members of the board?
I assume for revenues, 5% below PG&E rates is still the assumption that you're going on. Is that right?
That is correct. That 5% below PG&E rates are still assumed in this projection. What we've done is project over the next 5 years some changes in PG&E rates. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, and some changes in the PCIA that have gone up substantially recently and are expected and were announced to be going up again on March 1. But all of the projections over the next 5 years, assuming a 5% a discount for our customers is built in to these forecasts.
Andy, I have a comment.
I have a question from Pradeep and then Carlos.
Thank you, Rick. I did participate in the executive committee when we talked about these different options to reduce the negativity of the budget cycles. But I'm a little bit concerned about one of the options that is being put forwarded by Andy. That's regarding RA, meeting of RA obligation. As a provider of energy, we are as much responsible to provide the service in a reliable fashion as we can. And RA is an obligation that we undertake as a supplier of energy, electricity to our customers. And although there is a penalty which could be economically or financially beneficial compared to meeting the market price of RA, there's a question of the reputation and the optics. CCAs have been negatively portrayed in Sacramento as small players who do not know how to run the system if the things get really hard, which IOUs are supposedly in the field and they know about it. And one of the criticism has been about providing reliable service regarding provider of last resort. Now, when we don't meet RA obligation, we become one of those who may or may not provide the service in a reliable fashion. So I just wanted to put a little caution here that before we look at that $1 million savings a year, we also got to look at what it implies in the long run when people look at our track record. Thank you.
Okay. Carlos?
Yes. Thank you, Professor Pradeep. I've met with you enough times. That was going to be my question, actually. And in light of the Texas meltdown, in which there is no RA in Texas, right? I mean, it's a whole different wild world. Are we apt to get scrutinized more? And then if people find out that we aren't indeed, carrying enough RA and doing it basically for the reason that if the penalty is less than the RA, well, we save some money. But I'm also thinking about what are the optics related to it, given that there may be heightened scrutiny around this issue, given that, Texas, basically doesn't have any belts and suspenders, but again, this RA thing, the resource adequacy piece is something that might come up in this new world that may have been engendered by what's happened in Texas.
Okay, we're on questions, and I've got Larry as the question.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I was going to follow up with what Pradeep and Carlos had said. That was a concern, especially since I've been reading a lot about, at least in national newspapers, about how our energy mix could be impacted by what happened in Texas. So I think they've raised valid points. What I primarily wanted to talk about was to say how this was all pulled together when the Audit and Finance Committee met a couple of weeks ago. At least I went in not knowing exactly how we were going to deal with the severe financial consequences we discussed at the January board meeting. And I think Andy and his team came up with many of these solutions along with the subcommittee of the executive committee, and then reduced them to very presentable numbers that you see tonight. We saw a few more sheets at Audit and Finance, but I just wanted to thank him for coming up with some real interesting solutions to inordinately complex matters. So thank you, Andy, and thank you all who worked on this.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Pradeep and Carlos. I want to see if there's any public comment on this issue, and then I'll bring it back to the board for further comment. Is there any public comment on the issue? I don't see anyone raising their hand. If there's anyone on the phone who wishes to make a public comment, you can just unmute yourself and speak. Okay, I don't see any public comment. So are there any comments from board members?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Rick, is that Rick?
Thank you. I'd like to say that, you know, in view of the situation, I agree that the optics are not good, especially with Texas living out there on the horizon, the capital of unregulated everything. I think we need to be careful because questions are already going around in California about could we be the next state to have that, which I seriously doubt. But I know that there are some people out there who don't really support CCAs who would see this as a chink in the armor and use it as something to grab onto and start tearing. So with that in mind, looking at the possible $4.4 million savings, I think that might be one we'd like to forgo. I think that's the way I would go. Thanks.
Okay, I have Jeff Alfs, then Alex Terrazas, and then Donna Colson. Jeff.
Thanks, Rick. I'll back what the other speakers have said, which is you know, that was the one line item in here that I hesitated over, was just the sort of public perception. There's no physical reason why California should go the way that Texas has gone, but again, there will be ongoing concern and scrutiny about just overall resources and reliability everywhere going forward. So, you know, I agree. I mean, the IOUs have always tried to portray us as being sort of irresponsible and not carrying our weight, and I'm not sure I want to give them ammunition right now. That would be my thought. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Alex?
Yeah, I'm a little behind here. So I had a question, if I might, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Are revenues from Los Banos built into the model, and in what year do those begin? Just curious.
Yeah, Los Banos revenues are built in. They're assumed. Our assumption is that we will serve Los Banos starting in April 2022 is the assumption, which would be basically 3 months out of that, or 1 quarter of that fiscal year 2022 that's shown there, because it ends in June of 2022.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Donna?
Thank you. And the cost of serving that load as well is also included.
Thank you. This is really maybe a question for Andy, but I believe if we were to add back in the $1 million a year for the to put the RECs back in, we would still exceed our days cash on hand and our unrestricted days cash on hand by just my eyeball estimates. We would still exceed the current policy of 180 days, Andy.
Yes, I believe that's true.
So I just point that out to my colleagues that if we were to make that decision to do that, we would still be in compliance with our current policy. We're going to discuss it as well today, but as it is, and as it stands, we would comply.
Yeah, so let me add, just so everyone on the board knows, the next item on the agenda specifically deals with this issue about our policy, and we'll discuss it. The issue regarding RA that came up before the Strategic Budget Committee was we were in some cases paying extremely high prices for RA because it was generally unavailable. And there was some concern that there were parties that were holding back that resource in order to get a higher fee because they knew that there were demands for RA based on the CPUC policy. And there are a number of CCAs that said that they would pay the cost for RA plus whatever the market cost for RA, but not to exceed what the expected cost was plus the penalty from the CPUC and possibly from the CAISO, which I understand really hasn't levied that penalty against CCAs, but the threat is there. And that's why this policy recommendation was made in light of the fact that it would save us $4.4 million, which we otherwise would have paid in fees to those parties that were holding off the RA at a cost in excess of what the penalty was. I don't see any more comments on this, and this is informational. So the next item on the agenda is to go to policy 18, which deals with the financial reserves policy. So unless I see someone else wish to make a comment, we're going to move on to item 8.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We were not looking for a decision, but we appreciate the input, and we'll have discussions internally about the input we received. The next item is about our financial reserves policy. Next slide, please. Our current reserve policy is listed here. It's maintain cash reserves at the following level of 180 days of total operating expenses. That's all operating expenses held as unrestricted cash. And unrestricted cash is defined to be total cash less cash held in restricted accounts, either for collateral reasons or by covenant, and reduced by estimated future fiscal year commitments for energy programs that have been approved by the board. So that's the part that's circled, and that's the part that we are recommending be removed. As I will show or talk about, we have among, or maybe the most conservative reserve policy among CCAs. Next slide. This as a comparison to a number of other CCAs, PCE is in blue. Our last audited days cash on hand was 276. Our budget is 255. Our target is 180, and we have a rating from Moody's. This also shows a series of other CCAs. Many of them have a target of 180, but they also have minimum levels of 108 or 90, in some cases, 120. In other cases, some CCAs that have a minimum, for example, EBCE has a minimum of 108, but at the moment they are not achieving that. Of course, they don't have a rating. And SVCE has a minimum of 90 with a target of 180, but their last budget had a 219, and they do have a similar level rating to PCE. Next slide, please. As part of our policy, we're obligated to review it every year. The strategic plan that was adopted last year by the board requires maintaining reserves of at least 180 days. As I mentioned, our current reserve policy is among the most conservative of CCAs. We were asked by the Strategic Budget Priorities Committee, as well as the Executive and Audit Committees, to evaluate whether we wanted to be more aligned and benchmarked to other CCAs. In other words, have a lower target and or a lower minimum. And to potentially change the reserve policy metrics that would allow us to have more flexibility on spending without violating the policy. As part of those discussions, I was tasked with having some discussions with the rating agencies, and while I didn't have formal discussions and they didn't put things in writing, I summarized some of their comments. They're not really that concerned with what the policy target or minimum is. They're more concerned with how much liquidity we have. And in excess of 200 days makes them comfortable, And something less than that starts to make them question whether we have enough liquidity to weather the kinds of things that some of the board members were talking about a while ago. Second point they made is that when and if we lower the reserve target to either a lower minimum or a lower target, would temper their willingness to consider ratings upgrade. Now, that could be somewhat of a just words, but I suspect that there's something behind that. They also wanted to make sure we understood as establishing that while it's our policy, as PCE's policy to have a reserve, there's nothing that precludes the board from enabling spending or cash to go below that policy. We would just be in violation of the policy. But having a lower target or a lower minimum would reinforce the rating agency's belief that we would take a stronger position and stronger action by the board in the event that we went below a lower target. Next slide, please. The proposed reserve policy is much simpler. Basically, though, it just removes, it is a little more, I think, hopefully better worded, but it also removes the carve out for the future programmatic commitments. And in summary, it's just unrestricted days cash on hand, which is consistent with most of the other CCAs about how they categorize it or characterize it. Next slide, please. I want to come back to my statement about uncertainty. We don't have much confidence in our ability to forecast rates. And our financial position and our financial strength is heavily dependent on those rates, the PG&E gen rates, since we're tied to those generation rates, and also the PCIA, which has a significant impact on our revenue. Approximately, if there was no PCIA, our revenues would be almost 50% higher. There's, as I mentioned, significant potential variability as a result of not being able to forecast. There's not much room on the expense side to make further adjustments. We just had a discussion about the RA and $4.4 million, and there's not a lot of other movement or room for movement. And energy costs represent 90% of total expenses, which are largely driven by market prices, which we try to constrain by our hedge policies, but hedges and the ability to buy additional hedges or potentially move with the markets as well. There is room on the revenue side, and that was hinted at by an earlier question about PCE's discount. Right now, we discount our rates 5% from PG&E's rates. If reserves dip to below the required minimum levels, part of what I wanted to address here is to make sure the board understands what happens if we don't meet our reserves, whatever we set them at. So we would be, it sort of is almost a no-brainer that we would have to change that discount policy. And just for those of you who haven't been part of the investment grade rating process, the investment rating agencies have given us a rating which is largely dependent on their expectation that this board will adjust rates if necessary to maintain financial stability. And the only way we can do that is to first either lower our discount or have no discount. Next slide, please. Just to refresh for some people who may be new, how we come up with our rates right now. We take the PG&E generation rate and we multiply it times 95%. That's the 5% discount. That's what the total, what PCE customers pay. However, PG&E charges each of the CCA customers the PCIA. So what we do is we take the PCE customer rate and we deduct out the PCIA that PG&E is charging in order to make the customer whole. There's also a very small franchise fee, which we don't talk about much because it pales in comparison to the size of the PCIA. The effective generation rate for PCE ranges between 55 and 67% of PG&E's rate. So when we say that we're charging 5%, charging our customers 5% less than PG&E, the actual rate that we charge is 45% less than PG&E, but because they get charged a PCIA directly from PG&E is how it works. And I made this comment, so I wanted to the Audit and Finance Committee that I wanted to make it clear here that we're going to need to do some work around how we figure out what rates will be for Los Banos. Their PCIA rate will be different than the PCIA rate for San Mateo customers. So we're evaluating several alternatives about how we're going to assess that and how we're going to maintain a similar discount. And we will have a follow-up meeting with the executive committee to discuss options soon. Next slide, please. This is a summary of other CCAs. It's somewhat informal because it's not published, but this is a cursory review of their websites. As I mentioned, PCE is a 5% below PG&E. Silicon Valley Clean Energy is 1% below PG&E. They were at 4% up until October, and then their board or November, their board decided that as of this year they'll be 1% below PG&E. Several of the other CCAs are either 0.5% or 1% below. Clean Power SF is 1% above PG&E, and 3CE, which is Monterey Bay, is about 1% below PG&E. They calculate the way they apply their PCIA credit is slightly different. So, but it works out to be about 1% below. Marin County or Marin Clean Energy and Sonoma Clean Power have rates that are higher than PG&E's, sometimes as much as 5% above their PG&E's rates. Although MCE recently expanded into Solano County and agreed to match PG&E's rates for those Solano County customers for 1 year before the Solano County customers are obligated to pay MCE's rates, which I mentioned are approximately 5% above PG&E. So of all the CCAs, our 5% discount we should be proud of, and hopefully we can continue to maintain. We're not here asking the board to change the discount policy, but wanted to give some perspective on, given that PG&E's generation rates and PCIA rates have fluctuated as much as $150 million, which would, if that had been true, or if it becomes true, would significantly affect our ability to even come close to maintaining the 180 days reserve policy. Next slide, please. This is just for comparison of a few options that the Audit and Finance Committee asked me to look at. The top line, option A, is our current policy, which is a 5% discount versus PG&E. The projected net change in that position over the next 2.5-year period is minus 2.2 million. And just for comparison, I picked 1 year. So fiscal year 23 is $13.5 million loss. And the days cash on hand per the revised policy, if the board approves it, is about 215. That's consistent with the earlier slide. This shows discounts if we changed our discount to be 4% or 3% or 2% over the next 2.5 years. We didn't assume that it went forever because we think at the moment, the only time period when we think there's a serious or potentially a serious problem is over the next 2.5 years, and we'll know as that all plays out. You can see, without me going through it, the change in that position would add $15 million or $20 million or $30 million over that 2.5-year period, depending on the different discount. And I also offered a couple of other options here, which you can all either ask questions about or read on the website when it's posted. But the ones at the bottom, B1 and C1, are if we had a 4% discount for 2.5 years and we kept Los Banos at 5%, and 3%, and then we kept those Banos at 5%, would have a slightly worse effect than doing 4% for the whole territory. Los Banos only makes up 5% of our expected territory, and the discount is only a percentage of revenues on that, on top of that. Next slide, please. Just to give perspective, the current 5% discount for a residential customer yields an average monthly total bill of $113. I suspect that some of you on this phone pay more than $113 a month on average, but there are 250,000 or 260,000 residential customers, all paying various sums, and the average is $113. At a 2% discount, that's $1.46 less or more a month on average for every one of those 250,000 customers. Large industrial equivalent to extra $2,000 a month on top of $123,000. So for an average customer, not a big difference. I'm sure it's obviously more or less depending on whether the customer is more or less than the average. Next slide. So we, based upon lengthy discussions with the Executive Committee and the Audit and Finance Committee in reviewing, per our obligation to review our reserve policy annually, compare it to other CCAs, provide more flexibility, make it simpler. We are proposing that we simplify our reserve policy to maintain 180 days. There was a discussion about some lowering the number, maintaining 180 days, but removing the carve out for future program commitments. As I mentioned, we're the only CCA that was doing that. There's a lot of discussion about discounts and discount to PG&E relative to rates, and that was hopefully is intended to just be perspective for the board to understand. At this point, we don't need to do that, are not recommending a change. If the forecast as it's currently structured plays out, we wouldn't have to do anything or consider anything. But if one of those worst forecasts did play out, we could or would be back talking to the board about differing discounts. But the decision here at this that the board is being asked to make is to approve the revised reserve policy, which is here on the screen. That's my last slide.
Great. Okay, any questions? And I'll take public comment after any questions, and then I'll bring it back to the board for comments. I don't see any questions. Is there any public? Alex has a question. Go ahead, Alex.
I was just hoping to go maybe back one slide so I could maybe back one slide, maybe one more. And I just wanted to look at the exception for Los Banos. That's all.
Yeah, to explain, for example, option B1. Option B is a 4% discount instead of a 5% discount for all customers. And that would yield a net position change in fiscal year 23 of $7.3 million loss. Option B1 is if the 4% discount was applicable for San Mateo customers, and Los Banos was kept at 5%, and that would add would cost $400,000. So the $7.7 million loss versus a $7.3 million loss because of a slightly higher discount for Los Banos, just to walk through those numbers.
Okay, thank you. I absolutely appreciate that being worked into the model, so thank you.
Right. Let's see. I think Laura Palmer-Lohan had the next question.
Thank you.
Laura, you're
Laura,
on mute.
I think you're muted.
Laura, I think you're muted.
Thank you, sorry. So just a quick question with respect to the interplay between the rate discount and the days 180-day recommendation. Andy, could you talk a little bit about, it looks like you're landing on maybe we move into a 2% discount, and what effect does that have on our ability to maintain that 180 days or longer in reserves?
Yeah, first of all, I wasn't landing on 2%. In fact, I'm landing on maintaining the 5% at this point.
Okay, so, okay, missed that.
It was really just to provide perspective and not to provide so many columns about, I mean, can you go ahead one more slide, Shana? Yeah. The difference between a 5% discount and is $1.46 a month. The difference between 5% and 4%, it'd be 30 cents a month or something like that. So just to give some perspective on what the actual cost to a customer would be. I understand the potential leap to a conclusion that we're proposing change in the discount because of the days cash on hand. It wasn't an easy message we could figure out how to come up with, but let me try and summarize the message we're trying to deliver here. Forecasts have been all over the place for the last couple of months, wildly swinging. And if they hadn't swung back to better, I'd be showing a financial picture which was $150 million less and be showing us in days cash on hand under 75 days. And then there was another forecast that was released by the consultants, and then another forecast that was released by the consultants. There may have been even a fourth one. There's certainly been a lot of consternation about those forecasts and a good deal of debate amongst the CCAs about what's reliable and what isn't. And the message I'm trying to deliver here is that we don't control PG&E generation rates. We don't control PCIA. They can change dramatically, and when the forecast can change dramatically, and if the forecast can change, then the actuals can actually change. And if the actuals end up being worse than what we're projecting here, then the board may be asked to make the board will, I don't see any alternative but for the board to be asked to reduce the discount and potentially even adopt rates that are higher than PG&E's in order to make the organization be financially solvent. However, at this point, based on the most current information we have, it appears that that is not a necessary step the board needs to take at this point. So we're not asking the board to do it, but I'm teeing it up in case some of these bad forecasts actually end up coming back to haunt us.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I appreciate the perspective and context.
Sure.
Great, thank you. Betsy Nash.
Thank you. I'm wondering where multifamily properties fall, whether they have are residential, and how are they metered?
Leslie, do you can you jump in here?
Sure. Yeah, you know what? It's a mix. The house meters in a multifamily property are typically a commercial meter, so something that's managing or something that's metering like the hallway lights or exterior lights or landscaping or something like that. Those are normally commercial meters, and then individual residents are normally individually metered residential services. There are some instances where you have a master meter and then sub-metering that's a common setup, especially for like mobile home communities, but then they're flagged as a multi-meter residential service and they're charged on a residential rate. Does that answer your question?
You're muted.
Let's see, you're back on mute. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. That did answer that question. Has there been any consideration about having different discount rates for different customer classes?
We have had that discussion. It's not permitted for us to do that.
Thank you.
There are discounted rates for Cara and Farah customers, but they get those by applying based upon through PG&E rather than by us. But we're not permitted to offer different discounts for different demographics.
Thank you.
Which I could jump in there, which I might also bring up the question of how can we have a different discount for Los Banos versus San Mateo County. And so we're investigating that as well. We have seen other CCAs such as Marin maintaining a certain rate when they enroll a certain jurisdiction and then bringing that jurisdiction to the same rate as the rest of their customers at a later time. But we feel that we made a promise to Los Banos that, you know, part of the attraction was reduced rates. So we don't feel that we should be changing that as far as those customers coming on.
The next question is from Harvey.
Hi, I need to understand the rationale for the change in the proposed cash on hand policy. Is the idea that the programs that would not be required to be kept cash on hand could be changed in an emergency, or are we shortchanging those programs? You understand my question, right?
I think so, although I'm not sure I have a perfect answer. As part of looking at the, when we first went to the executive committee and presented the first forecast back in early January, or the most recent forecast, it was, as I mentioned, about $90 million worse than we had expected over a 5-year period. And that prompted that at the executive committee's request, they asked us to look at two things. One is go set up a strategic budget subcommittee and meet with the subcommittee about potential ways to address it. And second part was we should be looking at our reserve policy to see whether if we needed to draw down whether we needed to maintain such a high reserve policy, and whether we thought there was a way to be more create a more flexible policy that would allow the organization to operate and run its programs and maintain its discounts without violating policy. And as part of looking into that and evaluating that, we, as I mentioned and showed, we looked at all the other CCAs and their policies and realized that ours was the most restrictive. The other CCAs also have programs the same as ours. They're approved by their board the same as ours, but their reserve policy wasn't carving out those amounts into the future. And so what we were carving out was not just the current year's expected expenses for programs, but an amount which was carving out the amount that we expected to spend over the next 3 to 4 years. As part of the discussions with the executive committee and the audit committee, they asked us there was a consideration about having a lower number rather than 180, so something at 150 or 160, and we decided, and also about having a minimum and a targeted, like some CCAs have. And after a good deal of discussion of weighing all these options, the recommendation by both of those committees was that we would maintain one level. So we wouldn't have a minimum and a target, and that we would simplify the calculation and be more consistent with other CCAs. But it doesn't mean that we won't be assuming and planning for those programs. However, if in the event that we at some point were either below policy or less than the board was comfortable on a reserve policy, there are not that many decisions that the board can make to as a next step. One is to potentially go below the policy, and which potentially puts our credit or our investment grade rating at risk. Two is to cut programs at that point, and three is to raise rates to customers because we have an obligation to maintain a solvent organization. At this point, we don't need to do any of those. So all we're really doing is simplifying the policy to make it easier to calculate and easier to understand and be consistent with what other CCAs do and the way that the rating agencies are actually calculating it, rather than something more restrictive than everyone else.
My personal feeling is that programs are probably what makes PCE, and if it was a choice between cutting programs or reducing our discount, I would go with reducing the discount, but that's my 2 cents.
Well, hopefully it doesn't come to taking a vote on that at some point, but if it does, then the board can all weigh in.
Okay.
I have a question from Alex.
Maybe a comment or comments later, or I can.
Yeah, let me get public comment before we take comments.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me just see if there's any public comment on this matter. I don't see any hands raised from anyone from the public. So go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, just a thank you to Jan. So Jan, you read my mind about the 5% Los Banos discount. So thanks for the comments. Hopefully we don't get there to where that's a discussion and consideration for the board, but I do appreciate that consideration at this point. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Larry.
Thanks, Rick. Just a few brief comments. First of all, we've always felt that the reserve policy is a living document, and this is not the first time it's come before the full board to make minor modifications, which is what's being proposed tonight. And two, for those of you who haven't been on the board or were around when PCE was created, we always knew that PCIA was going to be the biggest unknown and risk factor. And when Dave Pine and Sean, and I forget Sean's last name, came around to the councils in 2015, 2016, it was something that was mentioned then as a high risk factor. And third, Audit and Finance regularly has discussions about credit rating and its importance to PCE, and we don't have any real strong and fast policy, but we do believe it's important for the long-term financial health of PCE. That's it.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Well, this is an action item, and can I get a motion to approve the proposed revised policy 18 regarding financial reserves?
I make a motion to propose reserve policy.
Second. Marty Medina.
Marty Medina seconded, and Rick Bonilla made the motion. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
that's correct. Yes.
Is there any further discussion? I don't see anyone. Anne, can we please do a roll call?
Okay, if you would please announce your approval or disapproval of the motion when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Yes.
County of San Mateo. Carol? Okay, Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Yes.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto.
Yes.
City of Foster City.
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos.
Yes.
City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
City of Millbrae.
Yes.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
City of Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno.
Yes.
City of San Carlos.
Yes.
City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside. And the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, great. We're now moving on.
Woodside is a yes for the record.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Ann, this
Sorry,
is Carol.
couldn't
Ann,
unmute
this is
quick enough.
Ann, did you get my vote?
No, but I've got it now. Thank you so much.
Okay, I voted yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, we are moving on to item number 9, which deals with a revision to Policy 1 on legislative initiatives and involves adopting a legislative platform for the current calendar year.
Okay, thank you. I'll present this. So the first thing we'll do is go to show you a red line of Policy 1. It's in the packet, but we'll just put it up here on the screen to show the changes. This is a policy that we adopted very early on, because it's Policy 1, about taking action to support or oppose legislation. So it just kind of changes it slightly to reference the board adopted legislative platform that gives me the ability to quickly sign letters of support for legislation that supports or opposes, to support or oppose, that as long as it's consistent with our legislative platform. So I would also confer with our staff legislative lead, who we do not have currently, but we're in the process of finding someone to bring on board for that. And if that is not our, I would confer with the legislative committee if there's time, or with the chair or the vice chair if the chair is unavailable, prior to taking a position on that. And then I would report back to the board as to what we did. And then we would also provide copies of letters or documents showing how we took a position on legislation or an initiative. So that's what we're asking for here for the policy. So I'll pause here to answer any questions about the policy before we move on to looking at the proposed legislative platform. And I will note that we did review this with the legislative committee a couple weeks ago, and they supported the proposed changes here. And we did review this with the ad hoc legislative committee, and they support this as well.
And I think it came to the executive committee.
Right, to the, yes, to both the executive committee and the ad hoc legislative committee.
Okay, are there any questions? I don't see any questions, Jan.
Okay.
So you can go on.
Okay. And so the second part of this is to approve the legislative platform. And if we can go to the next slide. So the legislative platform that we've proposed, which is also in your packet, covers 8 different areas, and it covers governance and authority. All of these areas, I'll just briefly kind of talk about what's in each of them. So the governance and authority is basically that we would oppose any legislation that takes away local decision-making authority for the CCA, such as the rate-setting authority and the procurement authority that our board has for what we do. And we would support legislation that makes it easier for other cities or counties to form CCAs or become members of CCAs. In the area of decarbonization, which is what we're all about, we would support legislation to accelerate decarbonization for energy, transportation, and buildings, and support efforts to expand access to transportation and building electrification, support state funding for EV infrastructure, support efforts to incentivize delivery of carbon-free energy on a 24/7 basis, and advocate for incentives to support underserved communities so that they share in the benefits of decarbonization. The next area is IOU charges and exit fees. And of course, this is looking at to eliminate the PCIA and make sure that it winds down within a reasonable part of time. So all of that, anything about the PCIA, more transparency on how the IOUs are calculating it, the need for more stability with the PCIA, and we would oppose anything that would increase or expand exit fees on CCA customers. For resource adequacy, there's a lot of wonky stuff going on in the regulatory arena on this, but basically we would oppose any legislation that would again take away our procurement authority for resource adequacy, and advocate for stability in this market. In the environmental justice area, we would support legislation that supports the ability of underserved communities to have affordable, reliable, and clean energy, strengthen the resilience of such communities, and make sure that those communities participate in decarbonization efforts. Community resilience, we would advocate for programs that can be implemented by CCAs to increase resilience to wildfires, PSPS events, and other disruptions. We would support legislation that would allow CCAs to do microgrid development and oppose legislation that would only allow IOUs to do those. And also increase resilience and reduce the need for new transmission and distribution infrastructure. In the area of local economic development, we already are committed to a sustainable workforce, so we would support legislation in that area, and also economic development for local regions and for disadvantaged disadvantaged folks. And then for the energy market structure, we would oppose any legislation that expands direct access or the ability of electric service providers to cherry pick which of our customers they would want to serve. And if direct access was expanded, we would support legislation that would require those direct access providers to match the products offered by CCAs. So if we're offering a 100% GHG-free product, that if they want to compete against us, they need to provide similar kind of product. So a lot of words there. It's pretty, but I think it reflects where we're at, and happy to, again, answer the proposed legislative platform. And again, this was reviewed with the legislative subcommittee and with the executive committee, who both of which supported what we have here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jan. So I'll take any questions, and then I'll do public comment and bring it back for comments from the board. Anne, you have a question. Ann Schneider, I think you're
Thank
muted.
you. Sometimes my mute button just takes a while.
No
Thank
problem.
you, and thank you, Jan. My concern is more in the details. It's under the decarbonization legislative goals, and I have been trying to figure out how to address the countywide group. My concern is that what exactly have we defined as the transportation area? Because we have high-speed rail that has just recently released its revised draft business plan. I have been listening to most of the last 6 months worth of board meetings, and they are really pushing their electrification and their greenhouse gas generation. However, their current and former and still existing plans are to turn Millbrae into a surface parking lot. So I am concerned that the greater good may overlook the damage that an electrification project can do to one city. I've seen this, and it was probably just by lack of understanding that nobody in the county, not even SFO Roundtable, not even my own city, commented when SFO moved runways 450 feet closer to Millbrae, and surprise, surprise, we are now significantly louder. Now that's not an energy issue, it is a GHG issue. So I'm just concerned when I read this, if transportation really only means electrified buses or electrifying cars and the built environment, then I don't have a problem. But if this is going to look at high-speed rail of Yahoo, they're coming and they're electric, they have already caused significant economic damage and arena damage on this. And I just want to be on the record that I'm scared of this one decarbonization section talking about transportation.
Okay.
So I guess my question then, Jan, is transportation only cars and buses, or are we getting into the train business?
I think when we think about this, we were thinking cars and buses and not the train.
Well, I'll tell you, having watched the pitch and the pitch that they're going to go forward with the federal government for COVID recovery, they're going to be pushing greenhouse gases and electrification. And again, I would like to think that San Mateo County would support Millbrae and not getting stepped on by a national entity that is causing a devastating effect, not just to us, but to the city of Brisbane.
Okay, well, I appreciate that input because that gives us more knowledge about what this is. We're really thinking of the programs that we're doing, which are our vehicles and EV infrastructure when we talk about transportation. But I know that, you know, Caltrain is one of our customers, Samtrans is one of our customers, and, you know, they're Eco 100 customers. So it's helpful to get your input in that we might be cognizant of anything that may have a negative effect on Millbrae. So I think it's good to know that, and we'll keep that in mind.
So in fact, maybe I would be more comfortable, or if the board would approve it, that there is specific language added on, it's on page 26 of the packet. Under decarbonization, it's number 2, Roman numeral 2. If there was just something that when a regional body is involved in something that specifically addresses or hurts or is involved or is located in a specific city, that they have not more than a say. I mean, Millbrae could have said, hey, SFO, don't move the runways closer to Millbrae, and the county would have said, economic development, good for all. Sorry, Millbrae, you live with the noise. I need protection for my city.
Yeah, I think what we're looking at here is legislation. So if this was something that was coming through the state, we're not really looking at regional bodies and, you know, decisions that the Caltrain board makes or SFO makes.
Well, I'm telling you, high-speed rail is willing to throw Millbrae under the bus for the benefit of the entire state, and they're pushing
this is way beyond a question, Ann.
I know. So I need it, or I have to report back, or Jan, we have a meeting with you in 2 weeks. This is a real concern for us. It is causing us millions of dollars of lost revenue and over 1,000 housing units. So this is real to us. I'll go on. My only other question then, reading farther down into the packet, is there is discussion of legislation on biomass, and I would like to be included in that discussion. If we're going to take a legislative position on biomass, that is my field.
Right, and the board has expressed in our 100% renewable goal that biomass would not be we would not meet that with biomass.
You know, to be honest, I'm more open. I serve on a statewide commission, and we're diving deeply into how the state's going to handle organics. So there might be some opportunities that might work. So well, I'm not necessarily, I'm negative. I'm saying that there's some changes happening around the state, specifically to assist Southern California, but I can help contribute to that discussion should it come up.
Okay. I think the board has adopted a policy of not having biomass be part of our mix, but that does bring up a question as to whether or not we would support legislation related to biomass, and there actually is a bill that's being considered. So, but we can get into those details once that bill is brought forth.
Exactly, and those are probably looking at forest resources. The way they're looking at it now is residential organics and food scraps, not just for running garbage trucks like we do here in Millbrae, South City, and Brisbane, but feeding it back into the electrical grid.
Okay, let me see if there's any other questions. Does anyone have a question? Let me see if there's any public comment on this issue. If anybody has public comment, please raise your hand. And I don't see any, so I'll bring it back for additional comments. Does anybody else have a comment? I don't see any comments. Can I get a motion to approve this revised policy?
So moved.
Second.
And was the motion from Ann?
Laura.
Laura, great. And who was the second?
Redwood City, Giselle Hale.
Giselle, okay, great. And I have a comment from Betsy.
Thank you. Sorry, I was slow raising my hand.
No problem.
I would like some clarification on how we stand on high-speed rail, because I don't, I think that is an issue certainly for Millbrae, but also for other residents up and down the peninsula.
PCE has not taken a position on high-speed rail, but that's something we could bring back, or something we could bring to the executive committee or our legislative committee as to how we should respond to any legislation that comes forth on high-speed rail.
Yeah, just to add to that, the concept of transportation was definitely about cars and buses. It was local transportation within San Mateo County, and our focus programmatically, of course, has been around moving to EVs and moving to reduce greenhouse gases in San Mateo County. We've never had a discussion about high-speed rail or, frankly, the train, other than our awareness that the train was in the process of electrifying.
And my concern specifically is about high-speed rail. And I'm perfectly fine as long as if something does happen to come up, it comes back to the board, or at least some sort of deliberate decision is made on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I would just observe generally that this policy is designed to cover those situations where it's impossible to bring the matter to the board. And in addition, I just want to highlight item 2 on the policy, which requires that before the chief executive officer takes a position on a piece of legislation, in addition to, of course, it being consistent with the plan, the CEO also needs to understand the range of opinions on the legislation or initiative and consider those opinions with respect to the cities in the county of San Mateo. So while, of course, all of these issues are significant, just based on this discussion, this policy would not allow the CEO to take a position on high-speed rail, just to be clear.
Great.
Thank you, Andy.
Jeff, do you have a comment?
I was just going to say, without taking a position on high-speed rail, I do think that we support the electrification of transportation. I mean, no one wants to see diesel trains, more diesel trains. So again, keeping aside the issue of what high-speed rail is doing in terms of overall traffic, I still think, I mean, if I could separate those two things, I still think decarbonization of transportation, even in that, I mean, I'd love to see decarbonized air travel. I think that the general sentiment there is something we all agree on.
Right. Okay. Rick?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that, without making decisions about whether it's going to get built or not, because that's not really within the purview of this board, I think our only thought needs to be that if it's using electricity, it needs to be renewable energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Ann Schneider.
Just back to Jeff's comment, I've been attending the UC Davis Air Symposium, and we are lucky that SFO is the main airport using biofuels. So we're getting better in that area. I will say, from my experience working with high-speed rail these last couple of years, if PCE came out and said, okay, you want a support letter for your electrification, and PCE sends it off, they will use that as marketing full agreement to their project. So that's why I'm concerned. I completely agree all trains should be not diesel, but this is a crafty group. And I just would like to make sure that if PCE, of which Millbrae is a member, does anything, even a support letter for electrification, that it get run past my city. It has severe negotiating impacts on us.
But per what David said, Ann, it'll come to the board. That's how it'll be handled.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further comments. If anyone has an additional comment, we can take it now, or we're going to go to a vote. Okay, Ann, could you please do a roll call?
Okay. If you would please announce your approval or disapproval of the motion when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Yes.
County of San Mateo. I see, Carol.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Yes.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto.
Yes.
City of Foster City.
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos.
Yes.
City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
City of Millbrae.
Yes.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
City of Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno.
Yes.
City of San Carlos.
Yes.
City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside. The motion passes unanimously.
Great. Okay, item 10 has been pulled from the agenda. It will come back to our agenda in March after going to the executive board. So that brings us to item 11, which is board member reports.
Rick, excuse me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, there were two things that we needed to have approved. One was to approve the policy and one was to approve the legislative platform. I heard the motion to approve the policy, so was that also to approve the legislative platform?
Sorry, I had assumed that it was.
Laura?
Yeah, I assumed that it was both as well.
Okay.
I will note that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Okay, so we're at board member reports. Does anyone have, I have Donna and then Pradeep.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to give a quick report that I'm meeting, Jan and I are meeting tomorrow to talk about the DEIA work. And today, thankfully, Carlos Romero decided to join our group as well. We persuaded him and we're very delighted to have him on board. So we should be getting something together in the next few weeks for an initial meeting, and then and Jan and I will be laying out a framework and a plan, and we'll be off and off on this work. But I just want to make sure everyone knew where we were, and thank everyone who graciously volunteered to work on this very important topic.
Great. Thanks, Donna. Pradeep.
Yeah, just a couple of interesting factoids about Texas situation of the last week. One was that the average wholesale price of electricity on February 15 and 16 for those 70 hours in Texas went up to $6,579 per megawatt hours, which compares to $20 per megawatt hour the day before and the day after. Number two, the Texas system came within 4 minutes of a complete blackout of the whole state because their frequency went down to 59.3 instead of 60. And 59.4 is the limit at which the generation plants start complaining. And another 4 minutes would have caused them to trip out and put the whole state into blackout situation, and it takes weeks to get back to operation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep. Jeff.
A couple of things. Peninsula Clean Energy is a sponsor of the Haas Energy Institute's annual energy symposium, and it's this month. It's March 16th to the 19th. It's 4 2-hour Zoom sessions. I actually RSVP'd to attend, and I'm not sure how many slots we would have. I thought maybe, Jan, I don't know if you know how many, do we have other slots for people to attend?
Yes, I believe so. And if KJ's still on, she will know for sure, but I think we have unlimited number of tickets.
That is true. We have unlimited number, and Jan, I suggested that maybe Anne send out the link for registrations to all the board members and alternates so they could sign up if they wanted to.
It's a really interesting conference. I've been the last couple of years, and the Haas Energy Institute has some really some pretty leading thinkers in this area, in some of the areas, especially around electricity markets. Seth Borenstein and Jim Bushnell, among others. Yeah, I was going to suggest maybe we put a link in the newsletter tomorrow. The other thing is, this came about kind of quickly and informally, but I got a lot of questions locally about the Texas situation, and I'm actually going to do a short, about an hour symposium on Tuesday evening, just talking about kind of a very inexpert view of the sort of what's happening in Texas and just some of the policy implications behind it. Again, it's not a terribly formal discussion. It was some local people were curious about it, but you are welcome to listen in if you like. I think Jan might join me.
How do we do that?
So.
And are you going to information?
I'll get the Zoom link to Anne to put in tomorrow's newsletter.
Great.
All right. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Any other comments? Well, I'll make a comment, which is we are ending this meeting at 2 hours and 10 minutes. And I just want everyone to know my goal is to keep these meetings under 2.5 hours. We all know they've gone very long, and it is going to take management and preparation to make that happen. And I know that staff is focused on working on that also. But I'm happy that we're ending in 2 hours and 10 minutes. Thanks.
Well done.
Okay, everybody. we will see you next month, if not before.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Rick.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.